Welcome to Zen Money Monday, weekly conversations with innovators, thought leaders, and entrepreneurial junkies about building good businesses, exploring what the idea of Zen money really means, and how to achieve it. With your host, author, business strategist, and Zen Money CFO, Liz LaJoy.
Carolyn, I'm so excited to welcome you today and talk about legal stuff. I get excited about this.
Well, I'm, of course, always excited about it because it's what I do every day. But I'm very excited to be talking to you because I love what you do, too.
So I think it would be really helpful before we dive into kind of the nuts and bolts of what you see as being important from a business legally. Can we get a little background on how you ended up opening your own doors? Because really, it's been less than a year since you went out on your own, right? How did we get to this point?
Oh, it's a long and meandering road.
Sure.
This is like my fourth career, it feels like. So I would say what really drove me starting this last year was I had been in the corporate environment for over a decade, working as in-house counsel, helping, a big business try and be as successful as they possibly can. And in the course of that, I got to spend some time with a startup within our big business. And I loved the startup environment. I loved what it meant, the possibilities, how a small team works and can come together and make a difference and really gets a chance to wear a whole bunch of different hats. But it's also a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And doing a startup environment, a really big environment, an old company, is hard. So I had an opportunity to kind of take a step back and figure out what was a way for me to use my services and the parts that I really liked about what I'd been doing and still have a better life for my family. Because when you work in a really big environment, in a corporate environment, it often means working 70, 80, 90 hours a week. And when I have 4 little kids and a husband who I like to spend time with. So I took some time and stepped away and then said, okay, so now what am I going to do? And I think that's really important for people who are thinking about what they're going to do next, is spending some time thinking about what makes you happy and what are your priorities in life. And I don't know about you when you started your thing, but it's kind of like you realize eventually that there's more than just the one aspect to yourself. And often that drives a lot of how people think about themselves. Mm-hmm. So I spent probably a good 6 months really spending time thinking about it, spending time with my family, and decided to take the leap after I had a couple of people reach out to me and say, hey, do you do this type of work? Could you help me? And I realized, yeah, this is what I loved about what I did, and being able to help some of those small startups and nonprofits and help them, kind of manage the legalities of having a business and be successful. And it just kind of snowballed very quickly. And I love it. I love every day of what I do and the different types of people I get to help. And my husband tells me every day that I'm a much better version of myself than I was when I was in the corporate environment.
That's fascinating. Let me ask you a question about that transition, because I would imagine, based on my understanding of general approach to the legal profession, which is billable, work your tail off all the time. Like, was it hard for you mentally to transition into this new version where you're creating space for your family, where you're doing it a little differently? Like, did you have sort of shock situation over those 6 months, or did it feel pretty easy to be like, I'm leaving that behind?
Well, corporate money is great, right? That's always nice.
And perks and benefits and all of that.
And perks and benefits. And I think virtual schooling would be a lot different now if I was a salaried employee. But in the end, money doesn't solve all things. So I am able to live a life that I can feel good about. And my husband, of course, we had to change bits and pieces of our lifestyle, which, was good for our kids. And yeah, it's been good, but it made us think differently about money and how we use our money and what are our priorities with our money. And then I thought it would be hard to think about the billable hour because I never ever had to do that. But it's a pretty easy transition. I would say the first 2 months, you kind of forget you're supposed to track because you're not used to doing that. But it's also the only way you get paid. So you start to remember to track.
Yeah, when I asked
And
the question, I was thinking more along the lines of, I guess I framed it in billable hour. It was more along the, like, that kind of job requires 60, 70, 80, 90 hours a week, maybe more, versus being able to kind of tailor your time differently.
so it does, but it doesn't. I would say I've found a happy medium in where I feel I can offer a service with a billable hour that gives me the lifestyle I want without me killing myself
Mm-hmm.
to achieve that lifestyle. And
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. If starting your own business means you're going to work 90 hours and work yourself into an early grave, what's the point of starting your own business? Like, the whole reason you do it is to be your own boss and work your own hours and make your own schedule.
I think it's easy to forget that sometimes. I notice this cyclical nature with my clients and with myself. I've gotten to certain points where I'm like, oh, look what I just created. I just recreated this thing that I left behind however many years ago. Maybe it's time to reset again. It's a really interesting process. So I'm glad that you feel like you found a pretty good mix this early in the game, for sure.
Yeah, I think there's always, I would say the number one thing I talk about with my executive coach is time management.
Right. Yeah. Yep, for sure. So we moved out of the corporate environment where you were working on sort of contracts and that sort of thing on the back end to make sure that the corporation was, legally responsible and things like that.
Yeah, so I mostly spent my time doing intellectual property,
Mm-hmm.
not patents. I'm not a patent lawyer, but trademark, copyright, and then also contracting. So, tiny contracts to large, vendor contracts, and then also customer contracting, which is a very different beast than vendor contracting.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're trying to woo a customer, you're going to negotiate things a lot differently, and you're going to frame your contracts a lot differently because the risks are different. And then also just, how I worked for a SaaS startup. So it's all the data privacy and things related to that. I also did corporate governance, helping a giant corporation figure out how to tell their story to their board so that their board can do their job with effective oversight, but then also, tell the story the management has to tell and explaining the risks appropriately to the board.
So that's a lot of different pieces, which I would imagine the way that my brain works, I would personally enjoy being able to do all those different things. And, how have we translated that kind of experience to what you're currently doing and offering?
Well, I think the biggest part is that I've always done what I do from the lens of we have to achieve our business goals, which is very different from the billable hour, right? As you were talking about prior, there's a difference between the law says this and I need to achieve this. So how do I understand the risks I'm taking with the law to achieve those goals? Because there's very few things that are truly, truly black and white when you think about how a business makes a decision and what the laws are. And so I think that's the biggest piece I've taken, is that I always want to understand what my clients' businesses are trying to achieve and the different processes they have in place, and then use the law to help them succeed in where they're trying to go.
Yeah, I talk a lot about our contract to cash cycle. This is like in exactly that same way of, look, we can write this contract however you feel best about it. I just want to make sure, and I know you do when you work with people, that you understand the ramifications of that, right? So if we get really risk tolerant in certain places, then here are the potential outcomes from that. If you're comfortable with it, go for it. If you're not, then maybe we need to readjust.
Right. Oh, absolutely. It's all a risk conversation. It's all about tolerance. When I talk to most clients, I use the words risk tolerance and say, so here's all the things that I see could be issues for you, but let's talk about what's the highest risk and the lowest risk. And then let's talk about what kind of money you have to address these issues. And ultimately it's your decision. And I think, as in working with you, that's how you often frame it. Ultimately, it's the business owner's decision. My job is just to help advise and counsel and then empower them to make the right decision that's best for them and their business.
So these days, what does it look like if somebody comes and says, I think I need to tighten up my contract language. I think I need help legally. Like, what does that process look like for you when they come to you originally?
So I always offer a free consultation because I think oftentimes people have one idea of what they're coming for. And then when we end up talking, it turns out maybe it was something else. I see this often when it's intellectual property, because people come thinking they need a copyright or a trademark, and oftentimes it's the other, or they might just need better contracts and they don't need either. So it's always really important to understand what they're trying to achieve to then advise them. So the process is that free consultation, and then figuring out of that what they need, and then explaining to them how I can help them. Ultimately, once they engage me, then we start the process, whether it's they send me, more information, what they're trying to achieve, their current contract, if they just needs a review. But it's a back and forth.
Sure. Can you speak a little bit more? I'm really curious your take, and I get that from a legal standpoint, this is just a conversation. This is not, official or anything, but I think the trademark question is really interesting because many people, especially in today's online space, I see so many people doing I have to get a trademark on A, B, or C, and not necessarily thinking through, it just seems like the next step, or because they get nervous. And you can spend a lot of money getting trademarks that aren't necessarily going to help your benefit or benefit your business.
Yes. Absolutely. I would say I often see people come to me and say, so I think I need a trademark. And they're really excited because I don't want anybody else to use my name in any other business. It's in the same thing. Well, are you worried about your business name, or are you trying to create a brand that you're really worried about? And those are two different things. And oftentimes people get the two mixed up. They're like, I picked this company name, like Athena Legal Solutions, and I don't want anybody else to be able to be Athena Legal Solutions. Well, nobody else can be in my state, just by nature of me forming my company. But if I really am worried about my brand, and I'm going to start that I would think my services and my brand is so important that I'm going to file a trademark, then I'm going to go through that process. But usually that takes time. There's only a few spaces where I would say where it's very, very competitive, where you might want to jump that process and do it right away, like thinking about food products or different things, or if you've been in business for a significant period of time where you've already built up brand and goodwill, where now it's time, you're going to be going broader across, your small area, and now you're going to go nationwide. Then it's more valuable. But it's not the first step. There's a lot of other things that are important first steps before that
I'm
process.
so glad that you said that, because I've always felt the same way around, for me, trademarking and things like that are really meaningful it can be a great feather in your cap if you're at a point where you're looking to sell. And we're looking at equity in a business and things like that. That's where we get into the value of intellectual property and can actually put real dollars to things. But most of us, aren't really at that stage. For example, I went through the trademark process for Zen Money, but I did it specifically because there was someone in the same space using it differently, sort of on personal money stuff. And there was a trademark lapse situation, and I wanted to take advantage of the timing where I could pick it up, right? So that was meaningful for me in terms of long-term planning for Zen Money initiative, but I wouldn't have done it otherwise.
Right, and it's different. You also have books too. So thinking about that, you've now put something out into the world that's, spreading far and wide, that it's building that brand that you want to protect too. So that creates a different scenario. And it's expensive. I often get people too who are calling me because they started the process themselves. And it's really expensive to fix trademark filings that weren't started right.
Oh, yeah.
The trademark office doesn't care. You've spent your money, you've filed in these classes, and if those weren't the right classes, it turns out, it's just going to cost you more money to fix the problem. They don't let you say, oops, I screwed up, can I swap these out? They're not kind that way. So I would say that's the other thing, that even if you ultimately want to do it yourself, although it's not the place I would start with self-advising, because it's so expensive, it's talk to somebody first. So you have a really good idea of what you're trying to achieve and the places where, the areas that you actually want to protect. Yeah, I think you'll end up spending way more money than you need to.
When you start looking at that, speaking from personal experience, right? Because I have the tendency to be like, I can learn stuff, I can figure it out, right? This is something similar to that, but I actually didn't end up doing that because I wanted to take advantage of somebody. I'm like, this is what it looks like. It makes sense to me. And then I ended up working with an attorney to do it, which normally I wouldn't have done because, and the benefit of it was I didn't know what I didn't know. Right. And so that conversation ended up coming back around like, here's really based on how your business is and the positioning. These are the categories. We don't, like you said, we don't want to screw this up. It's far easier to get it right the first time than to come back around and fix it.
And it gets a little more complicated, particularly when you think about intent to use versus actual usage, because oftentimes people who are coming are talking about, well, I want to do all these different things with it, but they haven't done anything with it yet. So you can reserve it, but then there's a process of how much time you have before you can actually claim it and get the rights to that. And so again, you might be wasting money before it's time.
And I've definitely seen people who are like, I am absolutely sure that this is going to be my name and my umbrella and whatever. And then they find out from a market research standpoint, or as they get into it, they're like, oh, people aren't really resonating with that. Or I have this new idea. And so they've gone through all this process and thousands of dollars of spend to get this trademark that they never actually end up using because they're not far enough in their business to have really nailed down what that languaging even might be.
And if 2020 has taught us nothing, it's that everything can change multiple times over the course of a year in your business. And so you need to be flexible, and a trademark really locks you in. And so thinking about, are you ready to be locked in, and where are the best uses of your money to lock you in? It's important to think about before you go ahead and spend the hundreds to thousands of dollars it could cost you.
I appreciate you doing that deep dive. I hadn't intended to get into that, but I think it's a really meaningful, useful thing for just tidbits for people, who are thinking about that. And, Carolyn has, graciously offered some time. So if any of this is kind of on your radar screen and you want to talk a little bit through it, we will be putting the links to how to contact and connect with her. She is based in Wisconsin, if anyone is interested, but she works with clients all over the place, especially around intellectual property, because as we were talking about earlier, before we started recording, that's a federal thing. So she can work with you wherever you are in the States.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit more about your business building, because I think you are in a really interesting position. When we started working together almost 3 months ago now, I think, and
already.
The summer went really fast.
It did.
So and in that time, when we first started working together, you were like, well, I'm actually already ahead of where I planned. What I like about how you approach your business is you're very like, here's my plan financially, and you were ahead of the game, which allowed us to kind of look at some opportunities from a hiring standpoint. You're in this growth mode. You've been going really fast. I'm curious how that's like, what the biggest ahas around that have been since you opened your own doors.
So I think the biggest takeaway is, and I've thought about this often as I've talked to people, is the importance of having good advisors and the planning process. I would not be where I am if I hadn't hired a coach who helped me go through the business planning process and really look at the possibilities for what my business is. The end of last year, I kind of picked a random number and said, this is where I want to be at the end of next year, and I'll feel like it's success. Well, working with a coach who could help me think through the business process and all the different things more and in greater detail, and who had more experience doing those things, it was like, oh, well, you really undersold yourself in this process. Sure, you can hit that, but you can probably do a lot more. And having people like you who can then say, okay, so here's what the possibilities are, knowing the different things you want to try and achieve. I just cannot undersell the importance of having a good coach and having, people, advisors who are helping you. I mean, athletes have coaches for a reason. Everybody needs one. And why do it by yourself when there's other people who have seen the ups and downs who can help you?
I think a lot of people feel starting out that even if they may want that version, it may feel like a bridge too far financially, but yeah, I'm obviously, I think it's important to have people around us who can help take us to the next level.
I almost threw up when I paid for my coach the first time, because I put it on a credit card and I had to explain to my husband, I just put all this money on a credit card and it has paid itself over hundreds of times over. So
But you
It
don't
was
know that
money.
when you put the credit card down, right? I mean, I know plenty of
You
people
don't.
who expect to have those kind of outcomes, put a bunch of money down, and then are disappointed. Like, so it is very possible to have the other version of it. So I get the
Completely.
throwing up part. It can be a big commitment. And a lot of times, you know, we're asking for that money up front, or
Yeah.
a portion of it. And it can, you know, it can be a big deal, but I'm glad you've had a positive experience there.
I think it's about how committed you are to your business too. When the first couple of months I had my business, I was like, yeah, I think this is what I want to do. I think it's going to be okay. But once I commit, like you have to really commit to your business. And when you really commit to your business, it like I'm a hard worker. I know that about myself. So, and if you put a goal in front of me, I'm going to achieve it. So it's also knowing yourself. And you're right. A lot of people can buy things. I mean, I think about every weight loss thing I've ever tried, right? I'm going to spend the $47 and I'm going to get access to all those workout routines, but am I actually going to do them? So
Maybe one.
I think that maybe one, the first one, maybe the first week, but you know, part of hiring a coach and doing that is that you need to buckle down and be serious and do the things, the hard work. And there's a lot of hard work that comes with figuring out where you want to be and how to grow and then taking those risks, those educated risks. I mean, did I think I'd be hiring people at this point in my business?
Less than a year in.
No.
And now we're looking to hire how many?
Three people. So it's exciting and terrifying all at once, but
Of course.
so is life. You know, anyone who's a parent knows how exciting and terrifying sending little people out in the world can be. So it's about doing your best and seeing where it can go.
Yeah, I like that reminder. Sometimes it's easy to get bogged down in the details or the fear, you know, and you're right. I mean, most of us get into this because we're excited about something. We're excited about doing this kind of work in this kind of way. And you got to remind yourself of that somehow, sometimes too.
Right. And fear can be really helpful, right? Fear makes you better at what you do because you think about all the things that could go wrong and then try to do your absolute best. The problem is that too often fear just stops people from taking the steps that, you know, could open up a million great doors. So it's keeping that fear in check and in its appropriate place so that it's helping you move forward versus hindering you from being successful.
Right. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about this whole hiring situation. Did you have a team in your old version of life? Like, we were managing other people, so we're not terrified about bringing new people on?
No, I've managed people. I've had a team of 8 and enjoyed it. I mean, there's challenges. I mean, there's benefits to being I forget, an individual contributor is the term that they call it in the corporate. There's benefits, right? Like you're accountable for yourself and you don't have to do a lot of the hard work that comes with managing people, but everybody knows that you can do more with a team than you can by yourself. So it's important. It's important to then figure out how to make that transition. And this will be an interesting experience for me to learn how that happens in my own business versus in a corporate environment where there's a little more safety nets.
And resources and checks and balances that you don't have to be the creator of everything. Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Yeah, I think it's.
And there's no one above me that I can raise it to.
Yeah, there's no passing it up the chain because you are the ups here, lady. Yep, that's how.
Yes.
What's been the worst part about moving into this space by yourself? Soon to not be by yourself.
Soon to not be by myself. I think it's the self-doubt that can take, it's the, am I good enough? What makes me think I can do this? There's so many smart people out there who are very successful. Why is there space for me to do this? And there's nobody else to bounce those thoughts off of other than, my poor family who gets to hear it and their eyes glaze over when I start talking about the law. So I think it's a lot of that you ride this roller coaster all by yourself, even within a day, up and down. Why do I think I can do this? Oh, it's great. So I think that's the hardest part, is just trying to manage that emotional cycle alone without someone who's right next to you going, you're great, you can do it, don't let that bother you. Of course you fell down, but you can get up. But I think that's also where having a good community of entrepreneurs around you or coaches who can help remind you of your successes and go, hey, but Carolyn, you're already ahead of your business plan. So maybe you screwed up that decision, but there's a lot of decisions you haven't screwed up.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. Yeah. It's amazing how our brains love to feed off that negativity and how easily we lose sight of the good stuff.
Yeah. And you just miss the idea. Like, I think one of the things I liked in my old role, I had a person who had shared the office next to me, and whenever I had a thought, I would bounce it off her. I'd be like, okay, so I'm thinking I'm going to tell them this is how we should handle that situation. And like I said, in law, it's not a ton of black and white. There's a lot of gray. So not having someone to say, so I'm working on this contract, but I'm trying to figure out the terms here. I could go this way and that way. You just miss having the people you can bounce those thoughts off of to like get you to a good spot. So I'm looking forward to that and having a team again where I have those people that I can, who get, you know, the nerdy parts about the law and want to like dive deep into them and explore it with me.
Yeah, I hear you. I get the same thing on my side. People are like, you always like to talk about this stuff. I'm like, I guess I'm in the right job. I've created the right thing for myself then. I get that it's boring for other people. That's okay too. Do you see, you know, what is the biggest thing that you're feeling like people are coming to you? Because you see a lot of people who are just starting, you know, in terms of needing to create LLCs and thinking about, you know, what is the right entity type and all of that. You know, what is the biggest sort of takeaway you'd want our listeners to know when they're thinking about the legality piece of their business, which is like finance, the place that we maybe like to hide a little bit?
I think the biggest piece when I talk to people is oftentimes they should trust their guts. Like, I've had clients who are like, well, so-and-so advised me I should just do this. I should just go out and do it all by myself. But I feel like there's pieces I don't understand or I'm not sure about. And so I just wanted to talk to you so I could understand. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, their guts are right. Like, there's risks that they're taking that they're not fully aware of. And so having someone that they can talk to about those risks is really important, because it's okay to take risk as long as you're doing it with your eyes wide open. And I think there's the people who are like, oh, you just need a DBA. You don't need to form an entity. Those people don't understand the types of risks that you're opening yourself up to, when it's very, very easy to form an LLC and just create that separation. Most people who are starting businesses have created a whole life for themselves, you know, prior to being ready to take this risk. And why would you want to put all of that at risk? Your home, your car, your family, all of that.
Because you have to do what, once a year you have to send in some money and like check a few boxes. It's not that hard to deal with. But
right. And isn't it worth, I mean, basically it's insurance, right? Isn't it worth putting a little money down up front to save you from what could be a pretty horrendous mistake down the road? Because things go wrong. That's life. And accidents will happen and mistakes will be made. But as long as you set it up right, you should be able to insulate yourself and your personal self from those big ones. I mean, there's a reason there's serial entrepreneurs. Not all the ideas worked out right.
Right. We think of, you know, it's interesting you say that, because I think people who are serial entrepreneurs, they're thought of as like, you're an idea person and maybe the follow through wasn't there and too easily distracted. My father's like this in some ways, but I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think there's a sort of darker underbelly to that, which you just touched on, which is the idea may have actually been great. I mean, or maybe the idea wasn't great. This is what I'm trying to say. And that's okay. But again, let's just make sure that you're acknowledging it for what it is so that you can officially like put it to bed and move on to something else, especially legally.
Right. And there's a difference between being a serial entrepreneur in your 20s when you don't have a lot of assets versus a serial entrepreneur in your 50s. If you're a serial entrepreneur in your 50s, you've probably learned it's best to have a lawyer, it's best to have a finance person, and that you know these are the allies you need on your side who are going to keep you out of trouble. I mean, some people just like always starting. They don't like the finish. I mean, there's a whole world of people who like that. So as soon as it's like stable, they're moving on.
Yeah.
And they want to do the next thing. But if they've made it into their, 40s and 50s, they've also learned how to do that and protect themselves.
It's worth it to spend the money on the front end to make sure that your I's are dotted and T's are crossed, literally. Yeah.
Literally.
What, I have so many questions for you, but I think we don't need to get into all of them right now. We'll have you come back on for other good stuff.
Right.
Since we've been working together, what has been the benefit or what's changed from your perspective around your business?
So it's interesting. Early on, someone had told me you should create kind of an org chart for your business. There's the person who does the finances, there's a person who's your assistant, there's the boss, there's all the people who do the workers, the marketing people, all those. You should have that. And right when you start, your name's in all those boxes. And your goal is to get your name out of all of those boxes. Ultimately, down the road, you sell your business, you move on. I was like, oh, that's really far off. Like, how do I get there? And I fought against that because I'm like, I'm really smart. I can do it. As we were talking earlier, I'm really smart. Like, I know how to do these things. I can do these things. Well, me doing these things and taking 8 hours versus someone who's an expert in them and taking 1 hour, my time and money are much better spent taking my name out of that box and giving it to somebody. So I think the greatest thing for me is that you've taken that spot. My name is out of that box and you've freed me up to then do the stuff that I'm better at. And also help me see better how my money is being used and where I'm making my money, and then how to use that money to continue to grow my business so I can put more names in all the other boxes.
Yeah, one of my favorite things, when we first started working together, it wasn't, I don't think, on either of our radars necessarily that a big part of our conversation was going to be around this hiring process for you, which was fun for me because, like you, I wore many, many hats in other organizations, including the HR one. And so I think it's been fun to be able to say, because I think when we first started talking, somebody had thought that it was a good idea for you to just hire out the hiring process, which we can totally do, but you and I talked about it and I felt like I just was offering my feedback, which was we could make this pretty simple. we could keep you at the head of this process.
Yes.
And maybe that was a good thing. And so it's been fun to see you be able to be like, oh yeah, even with holidays and going on vacation, I can still manage this without freaking out.
For sure. And I think the nice part is, again, it's having somebody you can bounce those things off of. I mean, you've been running your own business for a long time, which compared to me. So I think at times my brain tends to go back to corporate and overcomplicating. And so I think you helped me cut through all of, the lies and BS I was telling myself and said, don't overcomplicate it, figure it out from here. And that was just invaluable. I wouldn't be where I was had we not gone through some of those conversations in that process, and it was really valuable.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. That's the fun part for me, being able to just strip all that away and say what really needs to happen here and how can we cleanly get from point A to point B. And it's been fun to be able to do that with you.
It's always easier to do it for other people than it is to do it for yourself.
100%, which is where people like you who are highly educated and highly capable of producing, like this is where we really snarl ourselves up in our business because we can't see our own blind spots around that stuff. And so sometimes we do hang on to things longer than we should, or we take a path that we make life more complicated for ourselves. Oh, well.
Definitely. Which again, goes back to that idea of coaches and advisors critical to your success.
Awesome. All right. Last question everybody gets when they come on the show. What does Zen Money mean to you?
I think Zen Money means that you understand your money and you can be at peace because you know how it is being used to help you achieve what you're trying to achieve.
I like it.
And I definitely feel it now that I have you to help me kind of chill out about it. I don't have to sit there trying to do the numbers. I mean, there's a reason I'm a lawyer, not an accountant. So it's, it means that you're at peace with your money and how to make it work for you.
I have an ancillary question to that because I was curious what I've never asked you this before. I'm curious what your initial response or feeling around that term is, because being as an attorney, coming from a corporate background, I'm curious if that resonated with you or if you were kind of like, I don't know what this lady's all about.
Honestly, I didn't really give it any thought. I was like, whatever. Like everybody comes up with a cutesy name, right? I mean, my name's weird, but everybody has a reason for their name and what it means to them. And I think that's more important. And ultimately, we clicked.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to you talk, the value that you provide, and the light bulb went on and said, duh, this is what I need. This is what I've been thinking about. I've been listening to the voices that had told me, you absolutely have to know your finances inside and out. You should never outsource that until you are farther down the road because you have to know where your money's coming and going. Well, that's all true, but that doesn't mean I have to do it. And that person had convinced themselves and then was telling other people that it meant you had to do it yourself. I know where all my money is going and what it's doing, but I don't have to be the one who's doing that work.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's an important distinction, right? There's so many different layers. There's the bookkeeping work, there's the tax work, there's the analysis work. And I think as owners and founders, we need to be involved at that higher level. But do you need to be involved with really saving your receipts into a particular place or dealing with getting the financial reports prepared? Probably not.
Right.
Unless you love it. I mean, there are people who love that and they find that really calming and sort of a break from all of the doing in their business. And if you're that kind of person, fantastic. But if you're not, why are we beating ourselves up about that?
Right. No. And I don't find peace from that. I find peace from having you do it.
Perfect. If people want to reach out and connect with you, where can they go?
So you can find me at Athena Legal Solutions, LLC.com. You can also find me on Facebook under Athena Legal Solutions, LLC. And you could always email me directly at info@AthenaLegalSolutionsLLC.com.
Perfect. We'll put all those links in the show notes for anybody who might have had that little whisper in their head that maybe they need to talk to somebody and aren't sure who. Carolyn is a fantastic resource, which is why I wanted to share her with you today. Thank you so much for joining us, Carolyn. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.